Hello and welcome back to the Talking Leadership TV podcast series. My guest today is Matthew Rose. Matthew completed a Bachelor of Business in 2010 and a Master of Diplomacy and Trade in 2016. He undertook the graduate program at the Department of Treasury and Finance in 2013, where he stayed for 4 years before leaving for Exquisine. On a trip to Antarctica in 2017 with his father David, it was agreed that Matthew would join the family business, Exquisine, Australia's leading private label dairy dessert manufacturer. Starting at Exquisine later that year, he immediately took over the financial management of the company, and in 2023 he assumed the role of CEO. He considers one of his key achievements at Exquisine to date to be the signing of a license agreement with Mondelez, owner of Cadbury, in 2022. In his own words, "We're exceptionally proud that a company as large as Mondelez would partner with Exquisine. I remember in the final contract negotiations, there were two of us from Exquisine, and Mondelez had representatives from HQ in Geneva, QA in India, legal in Singapore, our main contract in Melbourne, and at the final moment, someone from marketing in America got involved. It felt a little intimidating, except that there was nothing adversarial in the negotiations, where we were all working together to achieve the same outcome. 7 months later, we successfully launched two desserts, a Cadbury Dairy Milk Mousse and a Caramello Mousse, nationally into the major supermarkets." The signing of that deal, alongside with some other exciting developments, sees Exquisine in a period of rapid growth. Outside of work, Matthew is active in his community, being the current treasurer and executive board member on two separate community groups, his children's toy library and his childhood synagogue. More importantly, Matthew is the father of two children. Matthew's leadership journey is quite an interesting one, but enough from me, and I'll hand over to Matthew. Matthew, thank you for giving me your time today, mate. So let's get into the first of the leadership themes that I've shared with you, and we'll start with your leadership and its beginnings. Where did it all start for you, mate?
I think I sort of got into leadership at an early age. If I think back growing up, I was coaching basketball as a teenager. When I got to university, I joined the I was the student representative on the academic committee, or whatever it was called. And I think that I sort of I fell into it, and then I got a taste for it. I thought, this is good, and I feel a sort of responsibility, I think, to lead and to be active in community. There's an expression that's always spoken to me, which is the saying, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? And that's always sort of been close to my heart, that feeling. And so I see if there's something that needs doing and no one's doing it, I sort of get this guilt. I'm Jewish, and we're renowned for guilt. Maybe not as bad as Catholics, but Jewish guilt's a real thing. So I get this guilt of I should be doing something here. I sort of got into leadership pretty early, I guess, and it sort of just continued through.
Yeah, that's and thank you for sharing that. That's an interesting response, and it resonates with me in as much as that being of service to others in leadership and wanting to help to get something done is a driver, and it's a good positive driver for leadership. Just before we go into what your definition of leadership is, do you think you've drawn any exemplars about being an effective leader from colleagues or parents or people in your social circles that have helped solidify that for you? Or was that a light bulb moment at some point in your life when you went, I want to be the person that's making the calls and the shots rather than being led?
Well, I think there's two parts to that. First of all, I think I at least learn more from negative role models than positive role models. And I remember my first job as a public servant. A new secretary came on and took over whilst I was there, and he said, I'm all about culture and bringing us all together, and My approach has been, so my ethos is to always be approachable, and I really want to work well as a team. And then I never saw him. So he was, really, clearly an exceptional guy. He's had a great career and a smart bloke, but there wasn't a genuine follow through on what he said. So I think that being genuine is really, really important in leadership. So there's some negative role models, but yeah, definitely positive role models that I've looked at. And this, we'll touch on sort of how I define leadership in a moment. But I had, again, at the public sector, I had a manager there who was beyond excellent. And he really made me stay in the public sector for probably 2 years longer than I otherwise would have, just because he was such a great manager and leader as well. You don't need to have the positional authority to be a leader.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. And it's really good in a career. And I'm coming at this from an old man's perspective. I'm pushing 50 and I've lived some life. And I reckon, and maybe you have a view on this, I hope you've got a view on this, that the good ones stay in your mind a lot. And that manager that you talked about, it seems like that was the top of your mind. But also the terrible ones stay up there as well, where you learn some shit and you go, okay, this is not what to do. And that example of the head of a department coming down and not matching the words with the actions, I think that can also be a product of, in those roles you've got so many people that you've got to interact with, that you can lose some of that genuineness because of the scope of the task. And I've always wondered, and I've wondered out loud on this podcast at least, if you're in an organization with hundreds or thousands of people, you're never going to meet all of them to have that one-on-one relationship. But the ones that you do meet, if you can be genuinely yourself, I think that speaks volumes for the tone of leadership that you can set. Does that resonate for you, Matthew?
Yeah, I think you're right. If you're leading an organization with thousands of people, you can't know everyone by name. I have friends who lead organizations with hundreds of people, and they tell me they know everyone's name and who works for them. We have about 40 to 50 staff here, and for me, that's sort of, I struggle at that level. So I think you can know everyone's name, and you can still be you can be approachable and genuine in your interaction. So I don't know. I think that being saying that you're, just because you lead a large organization, that you can't be approachable to everyone is maybe a bit of a cop out.
Yeah, no, sorry, and that's not what I meant. I guess that
Sorry.
you can't. No, that's cool. You can't be as present for such larger numbers of people as you might otherwise be, because you're never going to have the hours in the day to do it. But definitely take on what you're saying, that if you can be genuine in any interaction you're having and be that vulnerable you, and I don't mean vulnerable in a sense of safety, but be genuinely you, warts and all. I think that has some street cred that a lot of people don't give that credit for. And I think it's an art form, because leaders do that. Some leaders do that exceptionally well, and some don't do it well at all.
And yeah, I mean, and I think I'll give a quick anecdote. When I was in government, I was in cabinet meetings. You've got your ministers sitting there, and then behind them you've got sort of the secretaries and deputy secretaries, and then behind them you've got people like me who were down the bottom of the ladder. I used to sit in cabinet meetings every couple of weeks, maybe every month or so. And I remember the Premier Dan Andrews came around it, and like him or not, he came around and he introduced himself to everyone in the room, and shook your hand, said, "Oh, g'day, I'm Dan Andrews. You know, how are you going?" And exchanged a couple of words with everyone there. Now he has no idea who I am. You know, I met him a bunch of times, and I don't expect him to remember me, but I remember his openness in that interaction. Okay, he's a politician. That's his art form, and he's trained to do that. But I think you can, yeah, you don't need to have intimate knowledge of people's lives to still create a connection with them.
Yeah, no, I can understand that in my previous life, working life. I've met politicians as well, and I think you can. Most people, I think we've got the radar to know what's genuine and what's not. And I think that effort, what you're talking about, is making the effort to make the introduction, even though you may have met the person multiple times and they still may not know your name. At least they're making the effort to do it. And I guess you picked a pinnacle of leadership in any state or territory when you're talking about the premier. That, yeah, having the mental faculty to remember everybody you've ever come across, I think is a bit much, and I get that, but can also get the reverse. If you don't get that vibe from them that they're genuinely interested, that you're in the room, then yeah, I guess it would make for a difficult job if you're a public servant, or at least trying to wanting to stay. And the fact that you mentioned before that your previous manager kept you on because of how good he was at his job, that's a big accolade for someone. If your people are wanting to stay that way, I think the analogy that I use, and it's not a great one, but it's my one. You may or may not like it. Is that if you've got people that are prepared to jump on grenades for you, I think you're doing something right.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I think to get people prepared to jump on grenades for you, you need to be prepared to jump on grenades for them as well.
Oh
You know,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it
100%.
starts it starts at the leader has to show that first.
Yeah, no, yeah, 100%. Look, nice segueing here into your definition of leadership. So, what does that look like, mate?
I mean, this was I think yeah, clearly there's a textbook definition of leadership, and yeah, that's what it is. Leadership to me is, when I look at that, I think it's very personal and very different to, clearly there's so many different types of leaders, and that's why you're doing this podcast, because you're studying and a student of leadership. Um, so I can talk to what my style of leadership is, and it's, yeah, I think leadership is, for me, it's helping others, and it's enabling others to be the best that they can be. A leader needs to set clear direction and set strategy, and help bring people along. And yeah, okay, you might say I'm a bit of a political science nuffy. So there's a quote I like from The West Wing, and I don't know where um, when Sorkin got it from, but yeah, a leader without any followers is just a guy going for a walk. Um, so you need to have, as a leader, you need to set direction, bring people along with you. My style in that is to bring people along by helping them. So I see myself as, is that the servant leadership style? Is that what that refers to? I want to assist people to be the best that they can be, to then help, in this instance, our organization be the best that we can be. But whether that's, as I said before, in basketball or sports or whatever, it's for me, it's about helping bring the best out of everyone.
Yeah, it's telling, and I like hearing this when I'm talking to people on this topic area. Is that what motivate your style, your approach to leadership, the process, and what that means for you is about being enabler of others and helping them to get that step up, with the outcome being that the offshoot of being in that mindset is that you're going to get better productivity and better engagement from the people that you're working with. Because if you're not the kind of leader that's into command and control, and you see people as an asset and a tool rather than human beings, I think it shapes quite significantly what you can do in your business. Now, I'm talking from a lot of this is textbook knowledge and experience of an industry sector that is not the same as what you're in, but having never run a business the size of yours, my guess here is that, yeah, if you can bring people along for the ride and they feel invested in you because your first thought is about your people and getting them up and going, is a very different one to looking at them as an asset that needs to be expended to get the job done. I think people pick up on that quite quickly if you're not, whichever camp you're coming from, I think people know instinctively. Now, that said, some people view the world of work as very functional. You go and do a job, you go home, you don't want to do anything else. Whereas some see a lot of themselves in the job that they do, and they want recognition, they want help, they want someone to listen to them. And I think from what you've said, you bring that to the table. It's never a perfect process, obviously. There's always going to be a hiccup now and then, but yeah, that's an interesting approach, and it's again good to hear that that's what motivates your approach to leadership. I'm not sure if that's the textbook definition of anything, because I've never been one to get to the textbook definition around this, because I learned very early on, and you've made it very clear that we don't all have the exact same definition. But the question is, so what? As long as it gets to the number of being about people, I think we're kind of on the same page there. So I'll go to, I don't know if this is negative, but definitely something around the process of leadership. I've heard it said that the leadership process is a lonely road. Is it that, or is it as lonely as you make it?
Yeah, I mean, I think leadership is isolating, and loneliness is that the emotional response to that. And so, yeah, when you're, if we think of an organization being a leadership triangle, if you're at the top, clearly you are one of one. But I think that you can help alleviate that feeling of loneliness by getting help. So I mentioned before, I'm part of a tech group. Sorry, I mentioned it offline. So yeah, and that's a peer network of CEOs, and we come together once a month, and we talk through issues that are facing our organizations. I also have an executive coach or mentor. So yeah, I think if you're aware of that, the potential pitfall of loneliness, and you can actively work to mitigate that feeling, then yeah, leadership is still isolating, but you put support networks around the leader and don't fall into loneliness.
Yeah, and that's as much as you can do, because at the end of the day, if you're ultimately the final decision maker, if you've got those supports, I think making that decision can be made a little easier. But there are always consequences to the decisions that you make, and unfortunately, you're going to have times in a career, and I've been on one end of this, and on the other is that you have to deliver bad news to someone, or you've got to let someone go. And I think having difficult conversations, in my mind, having experienced it only a few times in a career, was probably the hardest thing I've had to do, or receive that feedback that, hey, surplus to needs, or hey, we're taking a slightly different direction, because you know that you're talking to a human being, that this is going to have consequences for them in terms of family potentially, or income, and all the rest of it. And yeah, that kind of shit would keep you up at night. I think
Yeah.
if you're not human, you wouldn't. It wouldn't. But I think you think about that. At least I would. I'm not talking about you. From my perspective, I think there's some conversations that would be extremely difficult to have. And then there's always that good side of it, where you've got a coach, a mentor, a peer network, where you can test your ideas, and you can make mistakes in a I hate the word safe space, but in a place where if it goes nowhere, it goes nowhere, and then applying it to the real world of your business is something else um, entirely. Look, we'll go to something more positive now. Measurement of success for you, and I don't mean that just financially. When it comes to your people, the business, what are your measures of success, Matthew?
Yeah, I, I think there's sort of two ways of looking at success. Intrinsic success, how do you feel you've done a good job, and extrinsic success, which is your KPIs, and are you doing the job? The second one, extrinsic success, easy. There's a whole lot of KPIs against your job. Are you reaching them or not? Fine. Yeah. For me, there's sales and gross margin KPIs and that sort of thing. Um, Intrinsic success is how I think about it, and that's how I measure it myself. And for me, that's as simple as, at the end of the day, do I go home confident that I've given it my all and that I've done the best job that I could do, which isn't the best job that anyone could do, because I'm relatively early in my career, and I hope that I'm going to be a better leader in 10 years than I am today. But if knowing everything I know and being the person I am, if I can look in the mirror and say, yeah, Matt, you've done the best you could do, that's success for me. Just being the confidence in myself, I guess, alongside that, to know that I've done everything I could. That's all. That's how I want to measure success.
Yeah, and it makes sense. And as I said offline, I think I learned something. Well, I know I learned something every discussion I have, and I never thought about um, creating that category of an intrinsic level of success versus the extrinsic stuff. And both have a place, and both will matter for different reasons. The extrinsic is what people see. The intrinsic is about you, and I think that split. It's a healthy split because the success or failure of the business is not just on the head, in my belief, of the leader. You've got people around you, so you've got other brains that are trying to help you reach certain things. And for me, part of that intrinsic discussion is have I led people to be better at their jobs or help them develop professionally, whatever that looks like. And in your business, you will know what those touch points are as you go along, because I think the two are very much connected. If you've got a happy, productive workplace, you would hope that gets reflected in those extrinsic measures, that you're potentially selling more, you're creating a bigger customer network, whatever that external KPI looks like. So it makes sense to me. You've helped me sort of funnel this to a point where I can ask you about leader capabilities. Now, you've given some hints on you've given some hints in this discussion of what those might look like, but I'll ask you outright: do you have a list, or do you have some key leader capabilities that to you are critical for being an effective leader?
For me, it's being genuine and authentic, and because I can't do leadership in the way that you do leadership, Eric. I can't do it in the way that Dan Andrews does leadership, because people will see through the fakeness of that, and you might be able to fake it to a certain extent, but at some point, everyone will know you're faking it. So I think the key, again, my personal opinion, the key capability is to know yourself, be authentic and genuine to yourself, and then what comes out of that will make you a good leader. As I touched on earlier, my style is to bring the best out of others. I'm not a technical expert. We have people, we have engineers working for us. We have COO who's excellent, head of sales who's excellent. I'm not better at their jobs than they are, what I can do is bring everyone together and help them be the best that they can be. So yeah, I think the crux of it is being genuine and authentic, and that every individual the best leader that they can be, and noting that everyone's going to be a different type of leader.
Yeah, no, 100%. This question, the next one, definitely one I'm interested in getting your views on. The nature versus nurture. So are leaders born or are they made?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I don't. I mean, I don't know, and I don't know that I have a strong opinion on it. Um, there's a really good book, Bounce by Matthew Said. I don't know if you've read it. Um, that was a book that really spoke to me, and he was looking at um, well, this exact question. He was looking at athletes really, and are they? Is it situational, or are they born into it, or? And his argument in the end is that it's that athletes are made. It's about the situation in which they exist. Not they're not born with special capabilities. I, and I liked his book, and that probably influenced me early on. I think that there are some people who are natural leaders, people who others gravitate to them, and so definitely there are some people who it's easier for them to be leaders. To be an excellent leader, I think you need to work on it. You need to be intentional in your development of leadership. Yeah, I think leadership's like a muscle. You can work out and you can make it stronger, but if you're not exercising it, it diminishes. And so, if you're going to be a great leader, you need to work on it. At some point, the nurture comes into it. Nature might give you a head start, but you need to be working on being a leader. And that's what I do. I don't think I'm a natural leader, but it's something that I feel strongly about. So I do work very intentionally to become a better leader.
Yeah, that's interesting response, and thank you for sharing it. I can't find myself, not that I'm geared to do this, to disagree. I think you need to develop those skill sets, and I think that you brought this up, and you're not the first to do this, but I'm constantly trying to update my thinking and expand it where I can. And on this one, what's of interest to me in what you said is that intentionality. Like if you're going to get better at anything, you have to practice and make some mistakes, have environments where that is allowed to happen and grow from those things, and hopefully not make too many mistakes where you're not going to have a business, but enough to help you be better at the process. And I think art form is the right word, but definitely the process of leadership is something that needs to be constantly worked at. And you mentioned you're an early career CEO or early career leader, and yeah, you've got probably a lot more of this to come into the future. And the ebbs and flows of a business is where you're going to get that training, and that comes from time spent in the role. I mean, there's no other way to do that. You could go out and read 10,000 books on leadership, and the lived experience of it is going to potentially trump most of the book learning, because you've actually got to experience some things before you can say, hey, this is what I think it is. And I think you're aware of that. And if you've taken in, and it sounds like you have, the experiences of other leaders, then you're armed as much as you can be for what's potentially coming. There'll always be a hiccup in that process. And I wouldn't be genuine if I didn't say that it's never going to be perfect, but it's how you deal with that situation. The situational nature of leadership, I think, is something you can't avoid. I'm not talking about situational leadership. It's being in a circumstance at a given time. I've seen this expressed. You used a political example before. I'm happy to do the same. And we had the floods up here in Queensland, the first lot of big bad floods, and when it hit Brisbane really hard, I think it was around 2011, the then Premier stepped up, and it was around the time of the elections, but she didn't step up in a way to promote herself, and sell her wares as the next Premier. She did what she needed to do to help people in a crisis response, and you could see that natural inclination to take the reins and help people, that was top of her mind. And I think that the situation, the context you're in, can really either bring that out in you or it doesn't. I mean, there's only two ways that you can go. Look, I appreciate your feedback here, and I think I'm going to change this last question a little bit, not so much looking back on your career in leadership, but you said and I'll use your words here, maybe in 10 years you're going to be a different leader. Let's use the crystal ball analogy. Where do you want to be as a leader, say in 10 years? What does Matthew Rose look like as a leader 10 years out from now?
I mean, I would like to, I would like to be, I guess, what I've spoken about so far. Yeah, I don't sit on the other side of my desk, so I don't know how I come across. I would like to be someone and a leader who's approachable, that people see in me that I've got their best interests at heart. I think there's definitely areas that I need to work on myself. Part of that is showing vulnerability and humility, and I need to work on that. I mean, not to just, I feel like a broken record almost, but I think where I'd like to be in 10 years is genuine and authentic, to use those two words again. If I can be that, then I think I've been true to myself. And if I'm true to myself, I can be true to everyone else. And there's the old, I don't know where it came from. I think my parents used to say it to me, before you can love someone else, you need to love yourself. And okay, this is leadership, it's not love, but or maybe it's love, I don't know. If I'm true to myself and I can help get the best out of myself, then I can help get the best out of everyone else around me. And that's what I'd like to do. Our business here is going to thrive if everyone working here is being the best version of themselves that they can be. And the role of CEO here is to help everyone be the best they can be. So 10 years, I'd like to be doing that. I'd like to be doing it now, but definitely in 10 years.
I'd like to thank Matthew for sharing his leadership pathway with us today. As always, thank you for following the podcast. If you like the content, please like or subscribe to help me grow the channel. Have a great rest of the week, look after yourselves, and we'll catch everyone on the next edition of Talking Leadership TV.